This is a Stories to be Told podcast. Hi everyone and welcome. I'm Tracy DW and I'm the founder and creator of Stories to be Told, an online educational hub of stories, mini documentaries, timelines and a wealth of other resources aimed at engaging all learners interested in understanding more about the history of the British Empire and Britain's colonial past. Stories to be Told is also about providing a balance of perspective on history, as what is often presented as fact always needs to be balanced with another perspective. Whatever you've been told about history, there's always another story and many perspectives related to it, and I'm going to discuss and explore some of those in my podcast series. Now, my podcasts do not aim to be the ultimate or only authority on the subject or topic under discussion, but I'd like to share what I have learned. I hope it will provide enough information to stimulate your curiosity to find out more by beginning your own learning journey about the subject and decide for yourself if history is a matter of fact or perspective. So, in this podcast, I'm going to explore and initiate discussion around the question: how did the seizure of Constantinople by the Turks in 1453 become an insurmountable problem for European trade? This podcast complements my story, Caribbean Rush, which is available for you to sample and download from storiestobetold.com. Before I get into my podcast, let's just establish what I like to call core knowledge for those of you who do not know what Constantinople is and where it is located. Constantinople is the ancient name for the city now known as Istanbul and is located in Turkey. This city was the capital city of three major empires in world history. The Eastern Roman Empire, established by the Emperor Constantine in 330 AD, who the city was named after, the Byzantine Empire, established in 1261, and finally the Ottoman Empire, after being captured by the Turks in 1453. The Turks had occupied the land around Constantinople from the 1300s, and so it was inevitable that this major city would eventually be captured. After the collapse of the Ottoman Empire in 1922, the Republic of Turkey was founded in the following year. In 1930, Ankara became the new capital of Turkey and Constantinople was renamed Istanbul. Constantinople was once the world's most populated city by the early 1500s and has the world's third oldest subway, built in 1875. So why did I choose this as a focus for this podcast? Well, there are two major reasons. The first reason was a factual one and is based on the geographical positioning of this city. Constantinople is the only city in the world to occupy a landmass covering more than one continent, in this case Europe and Asia. The city is also the gateway to the Black Sea. Because of this, it was the main junction for multiple trading routes between these two continents, which included the famous Silk Road trading routes. Now, there were two main routes. The northern Silk Road route started in Xi'an in China and went through what is now known today as Kazakhstan. The southern Silk Road route also began in China, but passed through what is today known as Tibet and includes the Middle East and parts of India. Both routes included the Taklamakan Desert, just east of the Gobi Desert, and ended in Antioch, now called Antakya in modern-day Turkey. Once traders reached Antioch, goods would be transported across the Black Sea and into Europe. So the social, political and religious occupation and governance of Constantinople was crucial in maintaining access to these trading routes to enable the exchange of goods and services across and between Europe and Asia. We must also note that the term Silk Road was not exclusive to describing the trading routes that China had with Europe. It also referred to China's trade with Indonesia, southern India, and as far as ports along the east coast of Africa. Now, I visited Istanbul in 2014 and I had a wonderful time there, visiting the Hagia Sophia the Blue Mosque, Basilica Sistine, and of course the Grand Bazaar, Turkish baths, and the renowned Sky Bar. It's truly fascinating to know that just by travelling across a single stretch of water, you can travel from Europe to Asia and back again multiple times in one day. My second reason for choosing this topic is that as I continued my learning journey for my book entitled Caribbean Rush, I realised that this was a key event in history that was part of a catalyst for major changes in the way Europeans traded, with not only the Far East and Central Asia, but also Africa, encouraging particularly the Portuguese and Spanish, and later on the French, Dutch and English, to search for new trade routes to the Far East and kickstart the European period of discovery leading to the colonisation of the Americas and Caribbean. This search for new trade routes encouraged closer interaction between continents from both northern and southern hemispheres and transformed trade into a global activity, establishing new trade routes by sea, which became more profitable, more favourable, more efficient and more lucrative than trade routes on land. So, how was the seizure of Constantinople an insurmountable problem for European trade? In 1453, a 21-year-old Sultan, Mehmed II, captured the city, bringing to an end not only the Roman Empire, which had existed from the 8th century BC, lasting for more than 2,000 years, but also the end of Christianity being the major religion for that city, and establishing the religion of Islam as the norm. This young sultan moved his capital from Edirne in the Ottoman state to Constantinople and established his court there. He not only monopolised trade through the Black Sea, but his armies were able to advance into Europe unchecked and virtually unchallenged. The Turks eventually occupied parts of Central Europe and most of Spain. I encourage you to begin your own learning journey and find out more about this relatively overlooked period in Europe's history. Due to the Ottoman occupation of Constantinople, both the northern and southern Silk Road routes were disrupted, and this made goods such as silk, pepper and cinnamon more difficult to transport and therefore more expensive to acquire for merchants in Europe. There was also a knock-on effect to trade routes in northern Africa, especially across Morocco and Algeria, as Saharan caravans existing of camel trains, which used to transport goods, lost their importance once exploration across the oceans got underway, due to the fact that land routes in general were easily prone to invasion and attacks. Having said this, let's add some perspective to the facts. It is important to note that at the time of 1453, the continent of Africa consisted of highly diverse and sophisticated social and political structures, ranging from communities that were hunter-gatherers all the way up to rural villages, city-states and large empirical civilizations. The Songhai Empire in northwest Africa was the largest in Africa at this time and ruled over by Sunni Ali. An impressive ruler, Sunni Ali brought the important trading routes of Timbuktu and Jenne under control and used his army and navy forces to protect them. Many other African states, such as Great Zimbabwe, also had well-established trade routes across the Indian Ocean and Persian Gulf to India and as far as China. African monarchs were also sponsoring expeditions to explore routes across the Atlantic Ocean, reaching the Caribbean and Central America. Here, I encourage you to begin your own learning journey about African explorers and to find out more about this fascinating time in Africa's history. Precious metals such as copper, iron and gold were central to the trade network. However, once Africa became subject to occupation by Europeans, precious metals became largely substituted for slaves. Now, I mentioned previously that the seizure of Constantinople by the Ottomans in 1453 may very well have encouraged European nations to search for new routes, to continue trading with the East, and also brought on a period of discovery and colonisation of the Americas and Caribbean. With the Portuguese and Spanish leading the way in discovery, England was a little slow off the mark, and this is what I perceive may have been a key reason for their delay. 1453 was a difficult time for any one English monarch to retain power. This was because two ruling families or houses, that of York and Lancaster, constantly challenged each other for the right of succession. This made succession from father to son insecure at a time when the feudal system was still the established form of local governance. In 1453, the House of Lancaster occupied the throne through Henry VI. England had just lost the 100 Years' War with France, losing all its land in France except for Calais. Due to mental illness, Henry's uncle Richard of York was made protector of the realm, and this began the dispute between the two houses, leading to civil war, and in 1455 the War of the Roses began between the two houses. The Battle of St Albans saw a brief return to the throne by Henry VI, but his son Edward was killed at the Battle of Tewkesbury a day before Henry's own death at the Tower of London in 1471. After Henry's death, the House of York came to power, but this brought no stability to the English throne. Edward IV, who was the cousin of Henry VI and son of Richard, Duke of York, died suddenly, leaving two sons aged just 12 and 9. The eldest son, Edward V, reigned for just 2 months before he and his brother were killed in the Tower of London, allegedly by their uncle Richard, Duke of Clarence, who ascended the throne as Richard III. Richard III was eventually defeated at Bosworth Fields in Leicestershire in 1485 by Henry Richmond, who became Henry VII. He marries his distant cousin Elizabeth of York, combining both the houses of York and Lancaster, securing the line of succession for his future heirs and becoming the patriarch of the Tudor dynasty. The Tudor dynasty and its patronage of the seas and multiple expeditions is a well-studied and documented timeline of history, so I won't go into it in this podcast. Questions for further thought and discussion. If Constantinople had never been seized by the Turks, what other events could have encouraged an increased interest in exploration and a search for more trade routes? Who reached the Americas first? The Africans or Europeans? And how can we find out? Do you think the transatlantic slave trade was a byproduct of events in 1453, or was it intended to happen anyway? And what evidence is there to justify either point of view? If you like this podcast, then check out my other podcast where I promote discussion around my thoughts on the history and significance of H.M. Windrush. Remember, you can visit storiestobetold.com for mini documentaries, alternative history illustrations and suggestions for biographies, historical places and timelines, all linked to the content of my work. And finally, don't forget what I like to call the heart and soul of the Stories to be Told movement. My stories, or poetic narratives as I like to call them, called Caribbean Wind and Caribbean Rush, are available here on my website or in both ebook and paperback versions on Amazon. You can click on the audio sample or on the webpage and try before you buy or decide to download. Feel free to like, follow and share me on Facebook and Instagram, where you'll be updated with events, promotional offers and future releases. It's a pleasure and a privilege to share my learning journey with you in this podcast, and I encourage you to begin or continue your own. History is a matter of fact or perspective. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next page.